Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. As she said, my name is Angela Pylan. I'm a senior lighting specialist and control specialist with Evergreen Energy Partners. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity today to talk to you about Luminaire-Level lighting controls. So I just wanted to share, I'll be sharing some resources toward the end of my presentation, but I'm here today on behalf of the Better Bricks program. And I wanted to share this because we have a lot of resources. I'll be focusing on Luminaire-Level lighting controls today, but Better Bricks, their organization is really around promoting efficiency in design, construction, operation of commercial buildings, really helping anyone who is involved in decision making around construction, or those professionals make informed decisions that can really help reduce energy costs. So you can see on the slide here, we have the lighting that we're focusing on today, but we also have other initiatives. So we have HVAC, pumps and motors, strategic energy management. So I would really encourage you to check out Better Bricks. Okay, so for today's session, we're really focusing on new construction and major renovation, but a lot of what I'll cover today, we could still look at for even retrofit applications. But these are the challenges that we're facing in today's buildings. Of course, we're always having stricter energy codes. A lot of times the lighting controls is the first thing around that. We're looking at reducing the loads and what is allowed in those areas. And they can be pretty aggressive. If I think back to when I started in this industry, what the lighting power density that was allowed then to what it is now is pretty significant reductions. We also have the evolving workforce demands and tight timelines. And so, of course, there's pressure in any new construction to stay on schedule. A lot of times, the lighting can be looked at in the lighting controls. It gets value engineered. In many cases, in my experience, sometimes that's the first thing that they will look at. And then, of course, we have owners. People have some of this smart technology that we're going to talk about today. They have this in their homes already. They're used to having this technology. And so they have an expectation that this technology, they'll have that kind of flexibility, that adaptability in the buildings that they're working and spending time in. And then last but not least, of course, is the budget constraints and that return on investment expectations. We went many, many years and looking with LEDs and, basic controls where we had some pretty strong return on investments because mainly the significant savings with the LEDs. But it's very challenging now if we have any existing buildings to try to go back in after it's been constructed and put in more advanced control system. It really is something that's important to think about doing at the very beginning of the project and incorporating that and making sure that it stays in the project and it gets incorporated so that, moving forward, that building has not just all LED lighting, but it has the controls that it needs. So what I like to say is we really need to change the way that we look at our light fixtures. You can see on the screen here, I have the picture of the smartphone. If this were an in-person session and we were all together, I'd ask you all to raise your hands and say, who has a smartphone? Most everyone. Okay, who uses that smartphone just to make phone calls and send a text message? And when I ask this question all the time, not surprisingly, what do I get? I get, of course not. I use my phone for all these other things. I'm on social media. I have apps that controls, my Ring doorbell at my house. We use our smartphones to do so many other things than just making phone calls or text messages. And this is how we have to look at our light fixtures now. We actually need to have them work harder for us because, of course, they can provide us general illumination, but there's so many more capabilities that our light fixtures have now, especially with embedded controls, that we can actually make them work harder for us. And so that's really where Luminaire-Level lighting controls comes in. I know I like to say it rolls off the tongue, LLC, Luminaire-Level lighting controls. When you think of that and you hear that term, just think it's an LED fixture with an integrated controls. And I have a picture here on the screen and you can see how small that control is. And quite frankly, it seems like they're getting smaller every day. And so when we have these embedded controls, they're going to be integral to the fixture, and they're going to have networking capability. So that's really key. What that means is every fixture that we have is going to be addressable. So I can program a light fixture with my smartphone. I can look up at each fixture and I can address that individual fixture and I can program it in the space. They don't have to be hardwired with low voltage cable to each other. In cases, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. The programming can be very, very straightforward and simple. But at the bare minimum, they're going to have occupancy sensing capabilities, daylight harvesting, where it has a photo cell. It's going to be able to do advanced scheduling, so it's going to have those type of capabilities. And so what we see here, especially for any new construction or major renovation, we don't have to do a major design around the, zones, specific zones for daylight harvesting, how we want the occupancy to be set up. We can do all that just like the fixtures are hardwired, but we don't have to design that. We can just order every fixture with that LLC capability and then go around and enable it in each area where we need that. So it kind of gives us, a smart building, if you will, without any additional wiring, centralized controls, any additional cost in a lot of cases. So I like showing this slide because what the difference is with LLC, you can see a traditional sensor on here. LLC, the difference is the granularity. So this is a very traditional that you see here, and then we move to this. Look at the fixtures with the embedded controls. If I were in the room previously and I walked in to get something, get something off of that desk, that all three light fixtures may turn on. That's a possibility. But if I have LLC with embedded controls, you can see the granularity and the coverage pattern. So if I walk in and I grab something off that desk, probably just the first fixture is going to turn on. Or of course I could have it in vacancy mode where it doesn't turn on at all. But it really is that granularity of each fixture having an embedded sensor. So I want to start with some of the simple LLC capabilities. So when we're talking about Luminaire-Level lighting controls, in many cases we break it into two areas. So simple LLC capabilities, pretty straightforward. A lot of us are comfortable with some of this technology that we see here, and then the expanded capabilities. Many of the buildings, I would probably say personally, maybe 70 to 80% of people utilizing this technology fall under this simple capabilities category. And then the rest of the facilities, which tend to be larger, definitely tend to be new construction or major renovation, utilize some of these expanded capabilities that I'll be talking about in just a little bit. So let's start with the simple ones. Obviously, occupancy sensing, this is code. We like to say that LLC is kind of featured, code compliant right out of the box because it's always going to have aux sensing and daylight harvesting. So you're always going to have that capability to integrate that, whether it's a window wall or a skylight, or maybe it's a remodel and then they're putting in new skylights. You're always going to have that ability to control it with those pretty standard code required controls. And then, you see the continuous dimming on here. For any of you that worked with dimming fluorescent or been in an area with dimming fluorescent in the past, it's very visual when you're in a space. And, one example I like to use is like a Walmart store, for example, or a Target where they have skylights and fluorescents. And then, you may be shopping through that store and clouds come over and then you see the lights go to full brightness. It's very visual. With LEDs, with LLC, and the technology that we have today, it's very gradual. So those light levels can change in a space in a very gradual way that is very smooth. And that may seem, oh, okay, well that's a nice feature, but if you're talking about areas in maybe hospitals or classrooms where the light level's changing as people are moving through the space or working or taking a course in the space, that can be very disruptive. So that continuous dimming is very important just to show a very smooth kind of transitional, space, get that extra energy savings without it being, a hard visual cue for people or a disruption. And then, two of my favorites, kind of high-end trim and task tuning. So LLC also offers high-end trim. And what we see is a lot of customers going into facilities and saying, okay, I'm going to set this maybe at all of these LED fixtures with LLC. I'm going to put this at 80%. So I'm just automatically going to dim these down by 20%. I'm going to achieve those additional energy savings in the facility, and it's not going to be noticeable. So those can't get turned up to full brightness. And as we know, LED is a pretty intensive light source, so in a lot of cases that works. The task tuning also is important. So because each fixture has that sensor, you can go into spaces, into areas, and adjust the light levels through an app, through a tablet, or on your smartphone. You can adjust those light levels for the people working in those spaces. I think about a challenge that, when I first came into the lighting industry many, many years ago, there was people championing, if I have 20-year-olds working in a space and I have 55-year-olds working in that space, the light levels, 55-year-olds, older people, they need higher light levels to do the same work as a 20-year-old. And so it was kind of, standard practice to design the lighting around, the oldest occupants using that space. Well, the technology we have now today, we don't need to do that. If you had LLC in every fixture, you can go around and make those adjustments in real time and set the light levels for what people are comfortable with. And then last but not least is zoning. You can set up LLC just as you would a very traditional hardwired kind of network lighting control system, where you can zone banks of fixtures. So when someone walks into that room, all 10 fixtures turn on versus just the first fixture turning on. You can set that up however you see fit for that space. But one of the things with all of these capabilities, even though I call them simple, when we combine these in every single light fixture, we can really achieve significant energy savings. So you see some examples on here as it was being forecasted by the Department of Energy once they saw this technology evolving with these connected lighting systems, saying, we really see potential for very significant savings with this technology. But I want you to look at those individual columns that I have on the screen. So if you're just going to dim fixtures only in certain spaces, these are average savings that you're going to achieve. But then if I'm, maybe I'm doing high-end trim, then I add daylight harvesting, and then I get an additional savings. Then I add occupancy sensing. Maybe I set it in vacancy mode, so someone has to walk into the space and then manually turn the lights on versus just them kicking on when they walk in. Once we layer these savings, or when we layer these strategies, that's when we're going to achieve these significant savings. It's not uncommon for us now hearing about projects that are saving up to 70+% savings with this technology. And again, it's because it's very, very granular. So we're going to talk about some of the expanded capabilities. So this is really where we get into looking at some of the focus on what we like to call business benefits, or some people refer to it as non-energy benefits. So, we have all those simple capabilities that I was just referring to, but this is where we're talking about our lights working harder for us, doing more for us. And so I'll go through some of these that are pretty exciting that we have this capability. So the first one is asset tracking, and you can see here two examples: a hospital, in a warehouse. I think this is one of my favorite possibilities that this technology offers. So what this is you can use RFID tags on pieces of equipment or people moving throughout the space. It can help you quickly locate. One of my favorite examples I've heard about was a hospital that invested in this technology. They put RFID tags on pretty important pieces of life-saving equipment, and they just did not have the expectation that they were going to have, it was going to be such a benefit for them. They said, you know, the doctors, the nurses, especially in the ER, instead of calling around floor to floor to find out where this piece of equipment was when it was needed in a critical moment, they could simply open up the app and find it immediately and get it to where they needed it to be. So obviously, you know, you can't put a price on that, but that's a huge significant benefit that this technology can offer. We also see another example that's very common is now some of the bigger facilities like airports, you know, using that, putting these tags on wheelchairs so they can quickly find where the closest wheelchair is at, so they, you know, it's not disrupting people getting on and off the planes and them getting off of the gates. The next one is space utilization and optimization. So what you're seeing here on the screen is an example of a heat map. So those deeper reds that you're seeing, those are higher areas of occupancy, so people in there. So it's getting all of that body heat, that, you know, the group of people there. So if you're thinking about, you know, you could have these sensors embedded into every light fixture, and we have to have light fixtures all over the space, don't we? We also have to have, I mean, interior and exterior, and you can have this technology. So if you're a retail facility or a warehouse, you know, you can see where, you know, the congregation of people are. I've heard a story of a big DIY chain that we've probably all been in, where they're using this technology and they can show where customers are spending the majority of their time, and then they're using that to charge their vendors higher prices to have an end cap in those areas where they can prove that customers are spending more time. I heard another example from a manufacturer where they were using this heat mapping technology, and they realized they had a hot spot, and so they went to look what's happening here, and it's something as simple as that was the water cooler. There was a break station there. And you know, once they kind of saw how many people were congregating in that area, they thought, wow, we actually just need to, you know, improve this, and we need to put a few more water stations throughout our facility, so people aren't having to walk so far to get water and then they're congregating. So, you know, it's just really giving people you know, especially a facility manager, someone running production, it's giving them an eye over what's happening in their facility in real time, and they can make those decisions. Another area where it's common to use this is in cold storage facilities as well, because they can kind of look at this heat mapping and temperature. We'll talk about that in the next slide, but you know, that's a great application, because now all of a sudden every single light fixture is actually a thermostat. So it's reading the temperature in a very granular way throughout the cold storage facility. Something happens with one of the HVAC units, they can be alerted very quickly, and, you know, make sure they can go in and you know, identify what the problem is without losing, you know, in some cases thousands of dollars worth of food or cold storage goods. So you can see on the slide here a picture. You can see it, you know, personalized temperature controls at occupied workstations. So this is giving an example where someone's sitting there working, they have the HVAC on, you see the lights on above their desks, they're working in that space, and their coworker next to them, who also happens to have a vent, is not there working. So everything is turned off. You know, this is, you know, pretty forward example, but it is trying to capture like a visual example of where we're heading in the future. And I think this is one of the most exciting capabilities that LLC has, and that's really tying our lighting in with the HVAC systems. So, you know, the majority of HVAC systems are designed for peak occupancy. So they're designed for, you know, the maximum number of people in the building, and that's heating and cooling. I always like to tell the story. I worked in an office for several years, and I dressed pretty much the same in the summer and the winter, because it was always so cold, even on the hottest summer days in that facility. And so I just wasn't able to get comfortable if I was dressing in anything, you know, that was then less than kind of winter clothes, you know, and that can be really disruptive. It allows you, if you're comfortable and you're comfortable in your workspace, you have the right light level, the temperatures is right, you're going to be more productive. And so what we're seeing with people utilizing this technology is integrating the HVAC in with LLC, and that the LLC systems can tell a facility manager, for example, this whole area of the building is not occupied. So maybe we can adjust those set points a little bit. If there's more people in a space, they can adjust, maybe the fresh air intake. So there's a lot of capabilities when we talk about combining these technologies where they're talking to each other and making those adjustments. And especially one of the things we see now in a lot of buildings is there is different times. I mean, people have hybrid work schedules. There may be times when no one's on an entire floor, and that's the LLC system could give you that feedback and say, actually, nobody came in on this floor today, or nobody used the conference rooms on floor 3. So one, I don't need the cleaning crew to go in there, so I can save money that way. I already turned down the HVAC. I didn't need it cooling those rooms that nobody went into. So a lot of potential when we're talking about those two capabilities joining. And just a few more on these expanded capabilities. Safety and security. So this is another example of them, a business benefit. You have the opportunity to tie in the lighting system sensors to the safety system. So, one example would be kind of that heat mapping that I was talking about before. It could sense if there were dangerous noises or if there was a fire. And then it can alert the occupants and actually help them, have a new path of egress to get away from that fire danger or those dangerous sounds. Another example could be simple as like this parking garage where, you have a smartphone, you work in that facility, it recognizes where you parked. And then as you go to leave at night and it's dark, the LLC system recognizes where you parked and it helps increase illumination as you walk to your car at night. So those are some examples of how you can integrate that. The last one here is circadian support. So, this is something where, I read that we're really meant to be working, under natural daylight, around natural daylight. And the research that's coming in is really showing that we can spend up to 90% of our time indoors. And most of that time is under artificial lighting, not natural lighting. And so in some cases, our bodies are not caught up to that. Another thing is if we step back and think about it, we're actually looking at a light source all day now, or in some cases all day. Many of us have 2 or 3 computer screens. We have a smartphone that we'll look at. That's lighting that we're actually staring at instead of it being above us. And so that has really changed, how all of this excessive artificial light affects our circadian rhythms. And so this is something that LLC and the LED technology can do, where it is adjusting the color temperatures of the LEDs to mimic what the natural daylight color temperature would be throughout the day. So I would say, in my personal opinion, this is still in, early, research phases as far as that goes. But, areas like, for example, in California, the school districts are testing this to see, if we're utilizing this type of system with circadian lighting, is it helping our students perform higher on their tests? Is it helping, maybe reduce disruptive issues? So, again, just another capability or a business benefit that an owner can put into their facility to help make people more comfortable throughout the day. And, I've heard people say, especially during winter times, when you're going into the office and it's dark and you're leaving when it's dark, that can be challenging. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to highlight in this presentation is last year the GSA updated their recommendations, and they actually incorporated LLC in this path that you can see there. And the reason why is that they saw the savings potential, and they put into here, okay, if you go through this path and there's a potential to integrate your HVAC with LLC, LLC is now a recommended practice. And that was just last year in 2024. So, federal buildings all utilize the GSA, and in many cases, states don't have to, but they have the opportunity to use those resources, and they're seeing these recommendations. So when we talk about this technology, we really like to say that, there's a benefit to everyone involved in a project from start to finish with LLC. And you can see some of the examples I have on the slide, but every stakeholder. So if we're talking about lighting designers, engineers, people that are doing the lighting design in a building, it really simplifies their design because they're not having to go through, as I mentioned in the beginning, looking at the daylight zones, making sure that they have all the fixtures labeled with daylight harvesting that need to be in those areas versus the areas where there's no natural daylight coming into the space. It also supports some of those expanded capabilities that we talked about where, if they want to tie the HVAC in and have, a smarter building, they have that choice, and it's very scalable. For a building owner and operator, I mean, that's really, really straightforward. If they have different tenants coming in, if there's changes in use in the space, they can actually go through and make those adjustments in real time without having to re-pull wire or redesign the space, install new lighting in an existing facility. I worked with one customer that has a 24/7 production facility, and they have very different tasks that happen in this large area, depending on what shift is in, 3 shifts a day. And so LLC was a natural choice when they went to look at what they wanted to do, because they were able just to adapt it shift by shift, and it's all programmed. So, they don't have to touch a thing. It just, it changes on schedule. For electrical distributors, it's really a no-brainer. I mean, they can choose, they can have a much smaller bill of material, especially around new construction when we're looking at these code required controls. They can just stock the fixture itself, and it comes immediately with those capabilities. So it can really streamline their stock, and then they can have that on hand to be able to offer that to customers. And of course, when we're talking about this technology, I've mentioned there's, pretty significant incentives, and Corey's going to be sharing that once I'm complete here. But, throughout the Pacific Northwest, we're very fortunate. There's many of the utility programs that really strongly support this technology, and they do with their incentive programs because they do see the savings. And then last but not least, contractors. When you're talking about installing LLC versus some other type of hardwired control or network lighting control, it's very simplified. So in some cases, manufacturers have said, can save up to 60% on labor and installation, simply because you're just installing it like a normal light fixture and, walking away. And then, some of the time that you would spend buying material, pulling wire, low voltage, you get rid of that. And then, obviously there is time involved to go through and program and commission. One of the things I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, was utilizing an app, whether that's off your tablet or your smartphone. I personally think the manufacturers have really focused on providing intuitive systems that allow users to really configure the system with the apps very simply. I've had personal experiences where I went to a facility to do an inspection and the customer was already there programming it themselves. They jumped on, they didn't even wait for the contractor. They figured it out, and they were going through and, making those changes like high-end trim and the occupancy sensor set points. So I think they've done a great job. It's not like our old, lighting control panels, systems where, it was run off of a single computer and like one person was trained in the facility. And if that person left, no one knew how to adjust the light levels and the system. That's just simply not the case with this technology today. IT considerations, this is a common question that I get when I'm giving these presentations or we're in the field talking about wireless controls. I just want you to walk away thinking that number one bullet that you see there. You don't have to be a cybersecurity expert. That can happen when you're working in facilities and you're talking about having wireless. Most of the major manufacturers have a system in place where they have you fill out a questionnaire, or there's, certain protocols where they can find out, what requirements that customer has around the IT, and then they can have their IT people and the customer's IT people kind of get together and make sure that, you know, they're addressing all of those concerns. I would also highly encourage you to leverage your local manufacturers reps. You know, they usually have control specialists on staff that work with this every day. They're highly, highly skilled, and, you know, they can certainly help you navigate any of these questions. One thing that we like to do through the Better Bricks program, kind of a peer-to-peer. So we like to highlight people that are local, that are supporting this technology and leveraging the technology and seeing the benefits. So I have a new one here that I'm sharing, Zach Sugara. I'm sure many of you know him. He has photon lighting design, and you can see here, he provided our program just some of the quotes that, you know, what key benefits of LLC help inform your customers. And you can see here, he's saying, you know, LLC well-designed lighting control systems really support that flexibility and that future-proofing. And then, of course, you know, if customers are looking at some major renovation and they're going back in to look at, you know, upgrading their lighting system, you know, LLC is absolutely ideal for that type of application as well. So another thing that we do, we like to have a lot of case studies. I know Corey's going to share one as well, but this is one that we're going to put the link to the video in the chat just because we're recording today's session. And sometimes when you're trying to do that with the videos, it can be a little choppy. But this is a new one that was a major renovation just across the river in Vancouver. So if you are familiar with the old Hewlett-Packard facility, this was the Innovation Center. They switched in an Innovation Center, and they used LLC throughout the facility, both for interior and exterior, to kind of take what was you know, an existing older office facility and really transform it into a multi-purpose space. And LLC for them was the perfect platform. So I encourage you to go check that video out. So really, in summary, as I'm wrapping up here, you know, my one hope is that you walk away today kind of really excited about the potential opportunities for your customers or facilities that you may be designing or working with around this technology, especially for new construction. These facilities can have the ability, if this technology is integrated, to be flexible now and into the future. You know, if they have this as a platform, they can continue to upgrade and have the features as manufacturers roll these out. And the bonus is that, you know, there's savings there. We're kind of showing that there's a simplified design, there's savings in around the material and labor. And so, you know, our hope is we really want people to see LLC as an option when they're asked about value engineering. Certainly, like, this is a great opportunity to do that versus something that is value engineered out, because there are really significant savings and adaptability, as you see. You know, we're not going to talk about it today, but, you know, even something like having demand response programs. This type of technology, because it's all connected, allows you to explore those possibilities now and in the future. So as I finish up, I just want to share a couple resources. I mentioned Better Bricks in the beginning, but hoping that you'll go check out that website. They just did a full refresh, and there's a lot of resources available on this site. We have, you know, case studies, we have past webinars that we've hosted, we have technical guides. The link to Next Level Training is on there. That is a free resource if you're interested in digging into this technology a lot more. And I just wanted to share a few of those resources here. So you can see we have these technical guides, so you can really dig into that. Understanding LLC controls, we have, I want to highlight one, the lighting performance specification language. So this is something that was created really for building owners, so they can kind of really understand what the benefits are, and then they can work with their design teams to incorporate this into their facility. And of course, Energy Trust of Oregon. This new buildings team, the Energy Trust of Oregon teams, you definitely want to bring them in as early as possible before you make any decisions. You want to know what those program details are. They're an amazing team. They have key staff, very supportive, very technically savvy. They understand this technology and some of the potential opportunities. And, so I would just really, really encourage you to start working with those teams if you're not already, and reach out and see if, as early as possible, see if there's something available for a project that you're working on. And last but not least, we do have another resource that we've created. So you see, these are demonstration boards. So we have partnered with many of the manufacturers to build these hands-on demonstration kits. And what these do is actually allow someone to experience how it would be if they were installing this, and then they went to do the setup and commissioning. So this piece is really, that can be a barrier for people, quite honestly, in moving forward with this technology, because they tend to get comfortable with the systems that they know, or the systems that they specify that tend to be hardwired. And so what these boards do is give that user that experience. These are available from multiple manufacturers through us, our program, at no cost in the Pacific Northwest. So definitely reach out to us if you're interested in utilizing one, or you want to have a training on one. We've had people take these to their customers to see, is this a technology that you want to have in your building? So, and I think, we have, I think about at least 12 in the Pacific Northwest. So certainly reach out if that's something that you're interested in. All right, well, thank you so much. With that, I have my contact information on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I am going to turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Angela. I think we can go on to the next slide, please. Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Hughes. I'm the Senior Program Manager for our Business Lighting program here at Energy Trust, and wanted to jump in just to share a bit more about our lighting program. I know today's presentation is largely focused on new buildings, in major renovations. One caveat that I wanted to mention is our business lighting program is focused specifically on existing buildings in retrofits. But if you do have any existing buildings or retrofits, we might be a great program for you to consider. We have a few different offers that I wanted to mention where we offer lighting and lighting controls incentives. So the first one being our more traditional standard incentives that would be offered through our lighting trade ally network. We work with a really large variety of building types across commercial and industrial, multifamily, horticulture, and have a wide range of lighting fixture incentives and controls incentives. We also have a more midstream instant discount offer. So this is more of like a point of sale discount. We have a large network of lighting distributors that we work with across the state. And so this is a great avenue for projects to purchase lighting and lighting controls directly through a distributor and receive an instant discount. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention our small business program. This program is really targeted to serve small businesses or community service providers and even some rural government entities, and we will do no cost lighting upgrades for qualifying businesses, and this often includes controls. We are seeing, kind of year over year, more of these existing buildings or retrofit customers are installing controls, so that's really great to see. It definitely is, where we're seeing the market heading, even on the existing building side. So yeah, happy to answer any questions if folks have them. And then we did include our homepage here at the bottom if you have any questions about any of these offers as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to the next presenter, which I think is Amy.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's really great to hear about the different programs in the Energy Trust landscape that people can use for different types of projects. I appreciate you coming on for that part of the presentation. And I'll go ahead and give a little bit of context about the new buildings program so we can dive deeper about if you have an LLC upgrade that you're looking to do as part of your new construction project. Next slide. So as part of the New Buildings program, there's a few different ways you can be eligible with your project. New construction, ground up construction is one of the ways you can participate, but also major renovations, tenant build outs, and additions or expansions. So if you meet any of those criteria, and as we've been hearing today, those are great times to consider LLCs, then you can participate in the New Buildings program. Next. So the way that you work with New Buildings is you contact us, and then we're basically your concierge for incentives throughout your project. So we offer cash incentives, support, and guidance from Outreach Manager. You'll have an outreach manager throughout the whole process that'll be there guiding you through. So you don't need to know what already is eligible for incentives in your project. You don't need to fill out a bunch of forms. What you do is you contact us, and then we let you know what you'll need. We can also look through all of your design plans and submittals and cut sheets and figure out what is eligible for incentives, what we might want to recommend, and make sure that you're getting all of the incentives that you are eligible for in that project. Next. And this really is through all phases of the project. So as soon as you have an address and an idea that this project is going to be happening, even if it's down the road, if you go ahead and contact an outreach manager at the New Buildings program, they can make sure that you get all of the incentives that you're due. So this starts even with early design. That's when that first incentive would be available for doing an early design meeting. And I'll go a little bit more into that in the next slides. So next slide, please. This goes over the two types of main paths that you can participate in the New Buildings program, because there's a lot of different types of projects. There's different ambitious goals. There's just trying to do a little better on your next project. And we really try to get everyone in and able to receive incentives if you're going above code on your project. The systems-based path is really if you're doing a standard project and you're just trying to reach a little higher with your energy efficiency and getting above code. So we look at the equipment that you're installing and how much energy savings there are associated with that, and we have prescribed incentives for that equipment or the reduction of lighting power density for your lighting installation. So it's really straightforward. Your outreach manager can walk you through how to receive those incentives. We also have the whole building approach, which involves energy modeling. So because this is more of a holistic approach, it can include more of the energy efficiency measures for your whole build. So we're looking at anything that reduces your energy efficiency. So that model where it will include your envelope, all of the systems, the lighting considerations, and that all goes into that energy model. And then we actually pay you per kilowatt hour or therm saved above code with that approach. So that includes a couple different approaches. I'll go into a little more detail with whole building in this next slide. So for whole building incentives, this is a breakdown of from the beginning to the end, all of the incentives that you might be eligible for if you're doing a project with energy modeling. That early design meeting that I mentioned before, there's a baseline incentive that you get just for having that meeting with your design team and having us there to go through an agenda of energy efficiency considerations. So we really help drive that conversation and make sure you're finding all of the efficiencies that you can. And then you get some additional kickers for having your solar trade ally at the meeting, a commissioning agent, and also for including some discussion around grid interactivity or what we're calling future ready buildings. So that's a newer offering within the program, an additional $500. And with all of that, you can get up to $6,500 just for that meeting. We also offer solar incentives, technical assistance. So that 60% of the cost of technical studies also includes your energy modeling. So that's a really great help to get you there with those projects. For whole building installations, I mentioned that we pay you for the energy saved. That's 25 cents per kilowatt hour or 80 cents per therm for a typical whole building project that involves energy modeling. If you go above and beyond and you're actually with that model achieving 80% or greater energy savings over code, we kick up that incentive. So it's 40 cents per kilowatt hour and $1.20 per therm for those savings. So we really help you to look at what your options are. You might be close to 80%, and we can just get you a little past that finish line and get you a lot more incentive dollars for that project. So that all helps a lot. And then we also have energy metering and net zero and zero energy certification incentives as well. Next slide. And one more offering that I'll just briefly go over here is our market solutions offering for multifamily projects in particular. So this is a little more simplified than a full-blown energy model. So we provide good, better, best options for a suite of different measures that you might do for your multifamily project. And you get paid per square foot of EUI savings for those different options. So you can work with an Energy Trust representative to see if that makes sense for your project. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll get a little deeper into one of our case studies. So this is a project that was an Energy Trust New Buildings Program systems-based project. So they did not do any energy modeling for this. They just let us know and worked with our outreach manager for the installation of their lighting systems and control systems. And as you can see, it worked out great for getting incentives through the New Buildings Program. So this project received $115,000 directly in Energy Trust cash incentives, and also will have an estimated $75,000 a year in annual energy cost savings. So that really adds up over time. It made a huge difference for this case study, and then also having $460,000 in annual kilowatt hour savings. So this was a big success story for us. I'll bring Corey Fulton, one of our engineers on the new buildings team, in for this slide so he can talk in a little bit more detail about why this worked for this project and how you can interact with the new buildings program with your lighting system. Corey?
Hey, yeah, thank you so much, Amy. And thank you, Angela, for all that great information on Luminaire-Level lighting control systems. I think I'll call them advanced controls, just to make it a little easier to say. On that case study, I wanted to mention, as Amy said, it is a lighting calculator project. It's not a whole building modeling project, but it's a great example of how advanced controls can lead to increased savings and increased incentives. And in fact, for this project, the incentive bump for it over an identical project that did not have Luminaire level lighting controls in it was north of 2.5 times. So the incentive difference was very significant. And that incentive difference comes out of a couple different things. And they used a lighting calculator. So for that lighting calculator, installation of Luminaire level lighting controls gets an incentive bump from 15 cents a kilowatt hour to 25 cents a kilowatt hour. The other impacting factor for why the incentive increased was that those controls also estimate a higher savings value for the project, so there's more kilowatt hours. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're considering Luminaire level lighting controls. One caveat to this project, I must say, is that it did have a fairly generous baseline allowable lighting power density. So that did help some too. But I encourage folks to keep this in mind as they're designing their projects, and really encourage lighting design teams to bring the owner in early to talk about advanced control systems and the sort of things you might be able to do to save energy and maybe get a few incentive dollars at the same time. Angela, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how advanced controls are handled through the whole building track and also through the lighting calculator track, which we've already discussed with that project. But first, I wanted to give a little bit of a preview of something that's going to be launched very soon. And it's some of you may be familiar, as was mentioned previously in this training, that the early design assistance meetings that projects have are eligible for a $500 kicker to talk about these grid interactive efficient building strategies. GEBs is what we're calling those. Well, we've been continuing working on GEB related offerings that the program is going to be rolling out. And we've also changed the terminology to something a little more friendly. We're calling it future ready buildings. So this concept of GEBs that was rolled out by US Department of Energy, we changed the name a little bit, but we're keeping those concepts together. And one of the first offerings beyond that EDA $500 kicker for talking about these subjects is a whole building technical assistance track. And what that track is going to allow teams to do is to do studies on topics like demand reduction program participation, and cost and incentive opportunities around those sorts of things, battery energy storage systems, integrated HVAC and lighting controls would be another great topic that could fit into that technical assistance framework. So I'm going to encourage folks who are looking forward to these, reach out to your outreach managers and ask them about this future ready buildings technical assistance offering. And again, I think those are going to be coming out, well, I know they're going to be coming out fairly soon, so keep an eye out for them. So to go on to the maybe a little bit more mundane topics here, some basic eligibility requirements. In whole building projects, we want to see the controls modeled in some way, and typically that's done through adjusting schedules or putting multipliers on LPDs, things like that. We basically do want to see them in the model so that the interactive effects are captured in the whole building energy modeling. And we also need to see a justification of how those strategies are being implemented in the model. You know, typically, if it's just a schedule reduction between the baseline model and the proposed model, we're going to want to see how you came up with that schedule multiplier, maybe that's showing reduced hours of use in the proposed model. Or we want to see justification of you're increasing the daylight area beyond what would normally be required by code to have daylight area controls, but you're expanding that area. So we want to see justifications of how you're implementing, an approximation of those control strategies in the model. And we'll also need things like, sequence of operations, and we'll need some kind of verification eventually of the actual system controls being in place. Now, for lighting controls in lighting calculator projects, that more prescriptive pathway, the upfront expectations we're going to have around these is we want to see that the control system itself is listed on the Design Lights Consortium controls QPL, and it must say within that listing that it is LLLC capable. So that's a fairly easy thing to check with DLC. The other thing is we want to make sure that all fixtures are either DLC or Energy Star listed. We will need to see submittals that show that each individual fixture is factory equipped with the individual sensing capability. And another thing to think about in advance and to turn in early in your project is a sequence of operations, because a key aspect of what we look for in these projects is we want to see that you're not only going to install these advanced control systems, but you're going to install them in a way that they're exceeding the code requirements, and that's key. If you install these advanced systems and you don't tell them to trim down that time to off requirement, or tell the system to use those expanded daylight zones, then you're not going to make any savings over what a code compliant system would be, even though you've got that advanced control system in there. So we do want to see that those strategies are actually being implemented in the design. And it's good for us to have that at an early point in the project so we can have an idea of what you're planning. So could you go to the next slide, please, Angela? So those are kind of the eligibility requirements that I just talked about. The verification requirements are once your building is built, your system is installed, and it's theoretically been commissioned and is working. You're going to want to, the things that we're going to be looking for at verification is generally we will go to the site and we'll verify that the fixtures are installed, that they are in fact the model numbers that were proposed. And we will possibly want to see some demonstration of the controls in some cases. And we're going to want to see final cut sheets and submittals that show that the system, that the fixtures, individual fixtures, are in fact advanced LLC. For the controls verification, I mentioned before, it needs to be a DLC listed controls system, but we are also going to want to see something that, again, shows us that those beyond code strategies are being implemented. That could be a lighting commissioning report. It could be, if people are familiar with the ANSI C137.9 format report that just got released at the end, near the end of last year. That's an advanced controls kind of standardized reporting that gives all those details about what your time to off is, what are your occupancy settings and all those things. That would be a wonderful help in showing what you're doing with your control system and verifying and allowing us to verify that the system is actually doing beyond code strategies. An additional thing to note is that we may ask for additional project verification depending on the size of the project or the complexity. And not all projects will be site visited, but some of them will be. So another note on the lighting calculator I want to mention is some folks might, the question might come to mind of, what about lighting credits? How is that going to impact things? What do I have to do with that if I'm going to submit a lighting calculator to the project? Well, we've built that into the new lighting calculator, the 2025 lighting calculator. It's not quite out yet, but it will be soon. Where you're going to have to provide a little bit of information about whether you've claimed any of those 5 lighting credits. There's a continuous dimming and high-end trim, occupancy sensor control areas, increased day lighting control area, and reduced interior lighting power are the 4 that we're interested in. The multifamily credit we aren't terribly worried about because that's only for multifamily buildings, and we will likely be handling those on a case-by-case basis. I think that's about all I have today.